Welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast, a podcast from the home of Scrum. In this podcast, we feature professional Scrum trainers and other Scrum practitioners sharing their stories and experiences to help learn from the experience of others. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to the Scrum.org Community Podcast Series. I'm your host, Dave West, CEO of Scrum.org, and I'm very fortunate and lucky to be here with a fellow countryman, Ryan Brook, based in the UK. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Dave. How are you doing today?
I'm very well. It's good to see you. So to kick this off, I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about yourself and maybe add a little fun fact for our listeners.
Of course I will. Yeah. So as Dave said, I am a PST, a professional Scrum trainer based in Gloucester in the UK. So a couple of hours outside of London, because that seems to be anyone's frame of reference for the UK, London. So a little bit northwest of London. I work for a consultancy, recruitment and training house. So I've primarily been engaging with Scrum.org as a PST since July of 2021 was when I got accredited. But before that, I was a chemistry teacher in a secondary school in the UK. So I had the honor of leading the chemistry department through lots of challenging times, but I decided to make a transition across to Scrum in late 2015, 2016, I believe, although God, that seems like such a long time ago now. But to answer your question about something fun about me, I mean, my wife would definitely say I'm not a fun person, but I'm very recently or soon to be becoming a magistrate in the UK criminal justice system. So I will be potentially becoming or having the ability to send people to prison very soon.
Wow, that's a little bit of a surprise. Certainly a motivating factor on your sprint reviews, right? If you don't get it right, Ryan will put you in the clink. As it were. Do you get to wear a little wig and all that kind of stuff?
Sadly not. It's there'll be three people, a chairperson and two wingers, as they're called, and I would be a winger sitting on the side, and we would equally determine a relevant punishment or support for the person in question, assuming they're guilty.
Wow, that is a surprise. Our first, maybe it's not our first Scrum judge, but it's the first one I've come into contact with, which is awesome. Thanks for that.
It's certainly a complex environment. Let me put it that way.
Yes, it is a complex environment with a very unclear product goal usually.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to give a little bit of background. You obviously provided your context and the like. I'd love to tell your story, your journey to the audience. So you're a chemistry teacher, which again is not particularly usual, as it were. Chemistry teacher teaching chemistry to children in the United Kingdom in the public school system there, and then you didn't know of Scrum then, right? I guess, and then you sort of transitioned into development and picked up Scrum. Tell me your journey, Ryan.
Well, yeah. So, like you say, I was a chemistry teacher, and empiricism and empirical nature is very familiar to scientists. And so, without knowing it, when we're thinking about curriculums and schemes of work, we are applying an empirical context. We're trying a lesson out on students. And then adapting it, for future years or for future classes. But to be perfectly honest, the UK education system wasn't in a great place 5 or 7 years ago. Some still wouldn't say it's in a great place. And I decided to try something new. To be perfectly honest, wanted to get into software development. I wanted to become a coder in the common sense. So I applied to a company that was taking non-technical people through a process and getting them upskilled in working within agile teams as software developers. The sad fact was, 2 years into that, I realized I was not very good at writing code, but what I was good at was having the soft skills, and I'd like to think the professional values that went alongside being a Scrum Master. And as they say, the rest is history, really. But I just honed my practice, primarily working within UK government, and helping teams to deliver value in quite high risk and high high value situations. And fairly far down that line, I decided, you know what, I had experience with teaching people. And I firmly believe that the best teachers are those who practice and who consult at the same time. So I'm an active consultant right now, and I also train alongside it. And it helps me give nice stories alongside my training. And I can say, hey, do you know what? This happened to me 2 days ago. And I find that really helps students to relate. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Wow, so that's interesting. So you were fortunate enough never to do software development in a different way than a sort of agile perspective, right? Would that be true to say, Ryan?
I would certainly say that's what a lot of organizations would say, that I'd never worked in anything other than agile. I have worked in places that it was waterfall with a thin veneer of agile for, I guess, kudos purposes. But no, I'm working with a client at the moment who still thinks waterfall is the way. And it's great to still have those conversations, because, you know, agile isn't always the one true answer to everything. But I certainly am a proponent of Scrum and agile practices for them.
Yeah. So water scrum fall is always a context for some organizations, as it were. All right. So you started working. You were doing software development, and then you realized that maybe you'd be better to be in a Scrum Master role on the team, or that actually that part of your responsibilities and accountabilities in the team were better. Why do you think that is? You mentioned soft skills. Is it more than that? What was your motivation for first becoming that, changing? Unless you were really bad at coding, obviously, right? But,
you've never seen my code.
Yeah, that is true. But what was your motivation? Why? What were the skills that you thought were more important?
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely say one of the reasons that pushed me initially was, and this is hugely stereotypical, but a lot of the developers I'd worked with were very key shaped with their technical skills. But actually, I found some of them quite lacking in the ability to go and talk to customers and create and coach and have some of those difficult conversations. And that was something I was quite comfortable with. We actually had a Scrum Master at the time who moved on. And like I know a lot of Scrum Masters, they kind of more fall into the accountability, but I went and sought it out. I said, you know what? I can't say I'm perfect. I've got my PSM1 certification at the time. Can I do it for you? Can I try it? And it just worked. In terms of the skills that I thought I had, in almost some senses, I'd just say I was different to the skills that everyone else had. So I felt I rounded off the team. I was quite happy. I was quite friendly. And I was able to facilitate, because I was quite comfortable facilitating as a teacher. It's a stance I would say quite good at. And I was almost just filling in the blanks that the team didn't have at the time. The facilitation, the energy. Hey, everybody, how are we doing today? Something I know you're very good at, Dave.
Thank you.
But yeah, that's
okay. So, all right. So, what about professional Scrum? It's a little different from that sort of out of the box Scrum that everybody talks a lot about. It's not just the motion. There's something a little bit more. You mentioned professional values earlier when you were talking about what sort of set you apart, as it were. When did you first encounter professional Scrum?
I guess to a certain extent by accident. I firmly believe that when you do a job, you almost want it to be a vocation. And I felt that very strongly as a teacher, and I feel it perhaps even stronger now as a Scrum Master. It comes across with that continued growth and learning that you just want. And I saw it in some of the mentors I had at the time. There was never any understanding of perfection in a good way. We were always iterating to try and get better. And I guess that was my first involvement in professional Scrum. But also because I think I saw a lot of organizations and teams just going through the motions. It was almost a dirge. It was, oh, right, sprint planning, review, retrospective, restart. It was that zombie, as I know some people would put it, Whereas, professional Scrum to me is about living it and embodying it, rather than just simply execution.
Yeah. So it's that feeling that you get when you're in a sprint review and you're asking the questions of the stakeholders, you're learning about the product, you're challenging your own understanding, you're being willing to accept that you're not perfect and you haven't got all the ideas.
For sure, it's when there's no status quo, and I like that. I like to think of it as leaning forward, right? We're always just trying to move forward, and it might not always go in the right direction, but we've almost got this, or well, I would like to think all Scrum Masters almost have this code of ethics, expectations that we can expect from one another. In terms of growth mindset, willing to be wrong, was something I had to work on initially. But yeah, it's a professional Scrum, I think, is very different than sadly what is or can be quite prevalent in the industry.
Yeah, I think it is. So how has professional Scrum and Scrum changed the way that you approach the world, the way that you work, the way you engage with your clients? How has it changed you? I mean, would your wife say it's changed you? I mean, that would, or
you know what? I know you're being sarcastic, but she would say it has, because the one thing I think that has changed massively with me, well, two things. The first of which is I maintain my my work in progress, right? I'm very single track minded. I'll do a focus and move on. And actually, I think she'll find that's helped with things like housework. Ryan, can you do this? A really clear goal. I can go away and do it. I'm very much the developer in our household. But also the transparency. Sometimes we have to have those discussions where we say, do you know what? I don't think that commitment is possible. I can't manage to do that. And I think she has appreciated it, even if it has created sometimes that level 1 conflict, as I would describe it in a PSM2 class, where we're having a disagreement, it's a problem, but it's actually valuable to have because it creates more discussion and transparency.
It is, I think, well, I'm certainly the developer in our household as well. There's only one product owner in our house, and it certainly isn't me, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. I don't know. All right, so I think the last question I have, which is something that's obviously very apropos as to you being a PST. Why did you love being a Scrum Master? It's obvious that you love working with people. You love helping them be successful. You like sort of like filling in the gaps, running that interference, helping people be motivated and excited about coming into work every day. So why would you want to become a professional Scrum trainer?
It's a really good question, and I guess it ties back into that professional Scrum thing we were talking about before. It's trying to find the next step in my personal development. And there's a lovely piece of research which I always used to quote when children were asking about revision, and I always used to say, well, 5% of what you copy out, note taking, 10% of what you speak, but you remember 90% of what you teach. And I just thought, actually, that's really powerful. So I was always getting students to teach each other about photosynthesis, about the Haber process, so that they would internalize it. And I just thought, why can't I apply that pedagogy, some of the skills that I've got, into teaching Scrum? Because actually, selfishly, it will also make me better. So when was it? Actually, almost at the very start of COVID, about February 2020, I interacted, I spoke, I started the journey. And, and 18 months later, the journey was more valuable than achieving the goal, because I've met so many people, which was one of the goals that I wanted to achieve. And now I have this great opportunity to talk about it, and use the skills that I've built up over I was going to say a lifetime of a teacher. That's certainly not true. I wouldn't say I'm too old at 31, but over the 5 years I was a teacher, it's given me those skills to give back into the community.
That's great. I think, and we love having you part of our community. One thing that I really enjoy about being part of Scrum.org is the community, the 350 professional Scrum trainers, and the fact that everybody's got an opinion, not necessarily the same one, but ultimately they approach it in a respectful and open way, and we all learn together, which is which you then take to your clients and to your customers.
That's right. You know, it's spreading the brand, spreading the word, and also I think there is an element of, oh, you know, becoming a PST is almost a bit of kudos as well. It's almost like achieving something. As Scrum Masters, I don't think we have a very clear progression. A lot of organizations like to do it with titles, right? You're a Scrum Master, then an Agile coach, then a senior Agile coach, then a program manager. It's just, no. It's about the learning and development over the role. You know, I once got told a lovely quote by a guy called John, and he said, "I may be called your career manager, but the only career manager you will ever need is yourself." And so I took that to heart. And so I've owned my career progression since then. If people aren't going to give it me, I go away and get it, or I move on. Simple.
Sounds great. Well, thank you, Ryan, for taking the time today. I've certainly enjoyed learning and being a little surprised, actually, you know, about your journey to being a PST, even though we've spoken a few times before. I guess I'd never asked those questions. So thank you. Hopefully our listeners got some value out of that. They learned a little bit about Ryan's journey, and maybe you can take that journey as well if you're listening to this and you're a teacher in a school. You never know, there could be a fabulous destination for you. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for taking the time, listeners, and thank you, Ryan. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.